Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and this episode will be very important because we will discuss on radical human life extension. We have our world famous scientist, Mr. Ilya. He is a subject matter expert. Beside that, we have other famous speaker, Professor Rob, Mr. Adam, Professor David Smith, and Mr. Dan. And you know that World Talent Economy Forums, actually, we are moving with many interesting projects and conference with the Government of Malaysia, International Chamber of Commerce, Nikola Tesla Graduate Schools, uh, even Indian government. So hopefully next 1 year will be more interesting for World Talent Economy Forum, and a lot of national contribution required, and we need to create a lot of uh, content like this because the developing nations, they are heavily involved with World Talent Economy Forum. Even today, one of the largest group of companies from South Asia, Cambrian Group, they come from with their 1 million people. They will join in World Talent Economy Forum, and we will develop their startup village concept in South Asia. So thank you, our honorable speaker, for all of your support, because your support actually helped us a lot. And now government, corporations, and academy, they start to believe that World Talent Economic Forum can contribute for national development. So I want to start from Professor Rob, how you want to analyze today's topic.
Well, today's topic is life extension, and it's an interesting topic, one that a lot of people have been focused on going back to Spain's exploration of the New World, where they were looking for the legendary fountain of youth. We're designed to age and die, and there certainly is some discussion about whether, if you were able to alter a person so that they could live indefinitely, whether they'd even be human anymore. We live and age and advance, and part of that process is biological. We're very different when we're older than we are when we're younger. Our brain functions are different. And the process of living and dying is how we evolve, and it's how the race adopts to climate change and other elements. So I think at this particular point in time, climate change is happening so fast, nobody's really able to adopt to it. The technologies being applied to this are broad. This came into the news fairly recently when Zuckerberg and Bezos invested in Altos Labs, a lab that's focused on anti-aging and life extension, with the idea of maybe we can solve this problem and cause people to live forever. And clearly, if we can control our climate and we can control our environment, then the need to die and have children born and to evolve, at least evolve against a climate, against an environmental problem, is certainly substantially reduced. There've been a lot of drugs that have looked promising in this regard. Metformin looked pretty promising. Drug used for diabetics. The thing is, it's got a fairly serious set of side effects, which include cancer. And rapamycin, it mimics a calorie-restricted diet, and calorie-restricted diets have been showcased to be able to allow the body to focus on repair and rejuvenation as opposed to cellular growth, which allows the body to conserve its energy and focus on what you want it to focus on, which is keeping you alive and healthy longer. A lot, of course, of what we're working on, at least right now, is to remove the symptoms of aging, because it's no fun getting old. So at least if during your normal or extended lifespan you can feel younger longer, that would clearly be a benefit. A number of policy decisions would have to be made if we ever solve this problem. One of them, you would have an almost immediate overpopulation issue. You'd have to extend retirement ages to keep people working. Otherwise, you'd have this massive number of retired people the state would have to support, and that would be a problem. And then one of the mitigating factors for that, of course, is the growth of robotics and the idea that at some particular point in time, people may not have to work. That's all up into the future, but they're all problems that would need to be addressed as we go down this path of extending life.
Thank you, Professor Rob, for your excellent analysis. Now I want to request Professor Ila. He is a world-famous scientist for life extension, and how you want to analyze today's topic, and especially as we have a audience from government, corporation, and academia, especially from Asia Pacific. So how you want to like analyze today's topic, and you want to give some good example for their research and innovation. Can you unmute?
Sorry about this. Now can you hear
Okay.
me? You see me?
Yes. Yes.
And you see the presentation? Great. So I wanted to show a presentation. First of all, thank you for inviting me on this day, October 1st, which is the International Longevity Day. Normally, it's the International Day of Older Persons, established by the United Nations, but we longevity activists established this day as an International Day of Older Persons, of longevity, and also the beginning of the longevity months. It's an initiative we have been advocating for about 8 years, since 2013. Hundreds of events and presentations were made in dozens of countries. The peak in 2015, there were events in about 42 countries. So I'm happy that this tradition continues, and I'm happy that we can still do it in some format. Of course, now it is more difficult to organize events, but we can do something. The topic today is radical life extension. I don't see any distinction between an aspiration for radical life extension and aspiration for, let's say, moderate healthy life extension. We understand that there is no physical law that limits our longevity. Like, there is no physical law, as in physics. You cannot fly faster than the speed of light. There's no such law in biology. Of course, we evolved in a certain environment, and so we have a certain maximum lifespan. But there is no law that says that this maximum lifespan cannot be extended. But we also have to be practical. We need to understand that with our current medical technology, we'll probably not going to extend life dramatically. But still, there is a possibility to extend it in some way, and it's all in our hands. The more we can develop this technology, then the more we can extend our life. That's our goal as longevity activists. And we can extend our life and our healthy life by intervention into aging. It's the obvious point of geroscience, that if we intervene into aging, we can prevent multiple age-related diseases and thus extend healthy life. This point is becoming more and more clear during this age of COVID-19, when we see that the elderly are the most affected. And so if we want to combat this epidemic, we also need to intervene in aging processes. There are many proofs of feasibility, many proofs of concept that it is indeed possible to intervene into aging and extend life, mostly in animal models. There are several classifications, such as SENS or pillars of aging of the NIH, Neuroscience Interest Group, or hallmarks of aging. They all focus on specific aging processes and show that by intervening into those processes, it is possible to extend life in animal models, and they're already moving to human trials. So there is a proof of concept, proof of feasibility. What are our other sources of optimism? Well, there are several. We see that life expectancy is very plastic, very modifiable. During most of the last century, it increased quite dramatically. The average life expectancy, there's no law in nature, there's no law in nature that says there's a limit to human lifespan. There's also no law in nature that says a human life expectancy or lifespan will increase. It depends on our level of medicine. So now we see that life expectancy is rather decreasing, pretty much all over the Europe and the United States and other places. So it's in our hands. There's no law here, so it can be increased or decreased, but at least we see that it is plastic. We can influence it. Also, the technology is advancing, no matter what we do. Probably not exponential, but at least we see that it is developing quite fast. Once again, on the pure theoretical biological level, there are non-aging animals such as Turritopsis dorni and Hydra, that show that aging is not something that is universal to all living matter, and in fact, life on Earth also potentially mortal. And of course, most importantly, there are experimental proof of feasibility from animal models, from mice. For example, in mice, it is possible to extend life by 30%, 40%, and in simpler organisms, in nematodes, many folds, up to 10 folds. Of course, we are not mice and we are not worms, but at least it shows that it is possible to intervene into aging. And another source of optimism is actually this field is very young. It was started about 120 years ago by the Nobel laureate Eli Mechnikov, who worked in Pasteur Institute, who first proposed a scientific theory of aging and offered the concept of gerontology, the scientific study of aging. Before Mechnikov, we didn't even know that the cells plays any role in immunity or in aging, and now we are beginning to program cells to intervene into immunity and aging. So all this was done in 120 years, just the lifespan of a super centenarian, and we can hope that further progress will be made in the next 120 years. There are already a wide assortment of interventions, already almost at the clinical stage. Still, they need to move faster to the clinic or more reliably to the clinic. You can classify them as detoxification agents, as supplementation agents. You can classify them according to the process of aging you can intervene. But still, there are many emerging therapies that are entering the scene. And already there are investments, as was said by the previous speaker, already in the billions of dollars. And of course, you cannot treat something that you cannot diagnose. So when we speak about intervention to aging, about anti-aging therapies or geroprotective therapies, we also speak about biomarkers of aging or clinical criteria for evaluation of aging that will enable us not only to predict age-related ill health, but also to test the effectiveness and safety of anti-aging treatments. We tried to do our part. A couple of articles were published last year, specifically on the relation of immunity and aging, the need to improve immunity to also combat COVID-19. Also, the project we have quantified longevity guide that tries to develop biomarkers of aging, of multimorbidity. I will not dwell too much on that. Just show that everyone can do his or her part, and then together we can advance. Of course, nobody canceled the usual lifestyle interventions like rest and exercise and will to live and balanced nutrition. All this has been known for centuries and millennia. There is no contradiction between this and advanced science. All this comes together. This can be seen as a bridge toward more advanced science. Once again, no distinction, in my view, between radical aspiration and less radical. We do whatever we can with the technical possibilities that we have. I will not enter into the more tangential areas like suborganization and man-machine synergy, things like that, but they can also be seen as props for life extension. I hope we are all convinced that it is possible to extend life radically or not radically as much as we can, but in some measure it is possible to extend life. And it is important to know for everybody, basically, for the general public, for the pharmaceutical and medical technology industry, for health insurance, for regulators, for policymakers, for scientists, all need to understand the importance of intervention into aging and extension of healthy life, because it is our common future. So what do we do if we see that something is possible, if we understand that it is desirable? Like with every social movement, we engage in activism and education. That's also an important part of the longevity field. That's also what I'm involved, mostly apart from actual research. And you can do it on every level. On individual level, you can learn more. You can join together with others. You can lobby. You can advocate, lead a healthy, life-prolonging lifestyle. all this is possible for everyone to advance the longevity field. There have been quite a few initiatives, advocacy initiatives, educational initiatives, like the Longevity Day that we are now celebrating, and several other initiatives that we also don't have too much time to elaborate. But it is possible to influence through advocacy. It is possible to influence health policy, research policy, even at a global level. Some of the initiatives of our International Longevity Alliance, we were able to contribute to recognizing aging as a modifier in the ICD. We're able to include aging into the WHO work program. So it is not futile, this advocacy. You can actually influence policy. And here in Israel, we also advance our advocacy. For example, we introduced this topic of health, longevity, research, development, and education into the Israel National Master Plan on Aging. A few calls for research proposals were issued. So once again, it is very important to engage in advocacy, not to support one's own project, scientific or technological, and raise funds for one's own startup, but also to try to build up the ecosystem for the whole field. And hopefully, thanks to all our efforts here in Israel, in Malaysia, and in the United States, around the world, we will build up this ecosystem and move faster toward actual effective longevity therapies. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Ila, for your excellent contribution. Professor David Smith, if you want to give some feedback or analysis on this particular topic, I think it will be helpful for our audience.
Thank you so much, Sharif. It's particularly interesting that you choose this topic today. As the good doctor said, this is part of the day set aside for this. But even more importantly, today is the start of RADFest. And RADFest is where all the leading practitioners of this come together, present their papers and things. And it's very like I say, good that we see that here today. The other thing I'd like to say though about that is uh, some of the founders out there, like Dr. Gray, he has stated that he believes that the first person to be able to live 1,000 years has been born in the last 5 years. And there's all these potentials going forward. And really, some of the nuances of where those potentials are going forward, I think we're very good in the place of where we can go and do those things and make them happen. Um, it's not just regenerative healthcare that is helping us begin to make this pathway down to this. But if you begin to look at the other advances we see in science and in technology and others, it's going to be well applied. You know, if I look at artificial intelligence enabled diagnostics, how we're doing those, the dynamic growth in wearables, yes, the regenerative healthcare, but also if I look at what we see in DNA, RNA manipulation, what we're seeing with pills to begin to help slow down and reverse, for example, the shortening of our DNA strands. We see others like that, that the possibility is dramatically going. Yes, part of what we're looking at today is almost still in the moonshot mode, but I don't think that's where we have to live on it. Um, the one thing we need to do is separate out some of the radical life extensions from what we have today. If you look today, some of the leading causes of death are episodical events. I'm in an accident. Well, radical life extension is not going to do a lot with you there. I'm a victim of extreme violence and others. You will see that still being there. But for the people who are living, taking care of themselves, have access to advanced medical care, uh, we should begin to see the life expectancy beginning to increase. Climate change will affect part of that. And we need to, as we've talked about the last several days, get better grasp on what we're trying to do with climate change to get there. One of the other things that I think is that we're seeing the concept of radical life extension picking up so much speed that we need to understand a couple of the other points of it. The two extremes here is people really oversell it because we see the advances in sciences, or they really see it as an extremely difficult task and it might not be happening. There is this whole equality, justice, inequality, access problem that's been going there, and who gets it, who does not. How does it play? How do we work with it across the various groups of stakeholders? Is this a personal choice issue? Is it a government issue? Is it more of a global type of issue? One of the things that has been populated a lot in some of the popular media is that radical human life extension is an extension of the One World movement as well, and how that can play as we work across the various issues in here. But I love the concept. My I'm getting older every day, and I was shocked recently. I wanted to go and extend some of my life insurance, and they told me I couldn't do it because my risk is too high. And I'm sitting there going, guys, mentally I feel like I'm 30 years old. What do you mean? But we're seeing that. And so even as we look at things like how we have access to jobs, at least here in Austin, once you hit about 55 years old, it's really difficult to move to new jobs if you don't create your own. So you see access to jobs. How is that going to change? How does it change the policies around renewing your driver's license? How do you do the other things like that? With my example, just trying to increase my life insurance coverage becomes almost impossible as we begin to go. I personally, with the advances in science, think I will, hope I will live to 125. If I go back and look at my son, I totally expect him to live probably another 25, 50 years longer than that. And I think we're at the verge of doing that. We're at the inflection point where in the next decade, things will fall in place to let us dramatically extend our longevity. But it's not just through science, it's through software, it's through other technologies, it's through changes in lifestyle, it's through the environment around you, it's through how we change how we eat and do the other things like that. It's the entire ecosystem has to come together to really do radical life extension. So thanks, Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Dan.
Yes, I think this topic is one that goes way back in the history of life. And as we know, all life on Earth is based on a molecule, deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA, and we are all carriers of this molecule. And we're actually getting close these days to creating replicating structures at very small scales, which basically if you're looking at the origins of life, which is appropriate to think about when you're talking about life extension, you need self-replicating chemistry on a very, very small scale. And progress has been made in this fact and on this area. So basically every living thing is a robot for this immortal molecule. As Richard Dawkins has pointed out, we're sort of gene robots. Our purpose is to advance the structure of our DNA into the, as a Darwin probably said, into the fittest or the most fit to reproduce mode that it can be in. Now, immortal life, indefinite longevity, these have been selling points in many belief systems of man. This is in many religions, the idea that you're not going to die is the big reason that you should adopt the belief system. And we can see early evidence of the recognition of death. And Neanderthals buried their dead ceremonially. In fact, even the early cave paintings in Lascaux, France, that may have been an attempt to save some of the knowledge of a dying person, or because really, you think about all the accumulated knowledge that a person has, and when they die, it's like a library being lost. It's like a a huge amount of information that's being burned down. And if you want to even think poetically, I think Leo Tolstoy had a book where he talked about the three deaths. The first death is the grave, and then the final death is when no one mentions your name anymore. So not just extending life, we should extend the knowledge that is within life. Now, the first country it's been talked about that treats aging as a disease, which is not done now. We all medical theory assumes that death is inevitable, but if one country will change that policy and say, look, aging and is a disease, death is a preventable condition, that's going to have a snowball effect where other countries will be forced to look at this and re-examine their policies of doing this. I've actually thought it'd be fun to kind of start a pool, which country is most likely to be the first to have a policy such as this. Maybe Israel. They've got the highest per capita percentage of PhDs on the planet. Maybe it would be Saudi Arabia has made Sophia, the non-human robot AI, has been declared a citizen. Sophia has been granted citizenship in Saudi Arabia. So there's some policies at the state level that are addressing the idea of longevity. Now, there's an idea of longevity escape velocity, and as another speaker mentioned, there are people living now that will probably achieve longevity escape velocity or indefinite longevity. And next would be the question of, well, who is this going to be available for? I mean, the richest among the humans on the planet are very interested in spending their wealth on this. In fact, I think there's a new $1 billion challenge just announced for people to come up with longevity ideas. And this is really all bound up in the near-term singularity, which the technological singularity is something that Raymond Kurzweil has talked about that might occur. I think around 2045 is his current estimation, when all these technologies like replicating nanotechnology, non-human superintelligence. In fact, that would be another way to solve the aging problem, is just invent a very smart and superintelligence. Say, look, how do we fix this death thing? Yeah, superintelligence. So, some people are buying cryonics policies where they will have their body suspended at sub-zero, cryogenic temperatures, and in order to be revived later on, and you would need a very mature nanotech repair capability to do this, but it's not out of the question. And you can actually, there's a guy I know in Florida, Rudy Hoffman. He specializes in selling these cryonic life insurance policies. So that's another way to cheat death, so to speak. The idea of downloading your consciousness into a better, more immortal substrate has been talked about much in science fiction and science fact, and that's becoming another route to so-called cheat death. So it's going to be a wild and woolly ride on the frontier of cheating death. There were a couple other things I was going to say, but I'll hand it off to the next speaker for now. Thanks.
Thank you. This is actually excellent discussions. I think our audience also enjoying today's sessions. Professor Rob, like longevity, this kind of research actually very popular right now in developed nations. My question is that, uh, let's say in developing nations already we have a lot of challenges and problem with our healthcare system. So what is your advice actually how the developing nations or countries from Asia they can engage with this kind of research, and how it actually helps to get some benefit in healthcare system?
Well, if you can understand, and by the way, I think you skipped Adam. I don't recall seeing Adam. So you want to grab Adam after I'm done? Yeah. So the life extension can be a significant revenue generator. There are clinics located all over the world that are focused on life extension, and so it can, if you develop the technology, you can open it up to a medical tourism, and people will flock to you from all parts of the world if the techniques work. In emerging nations, though, you have to recognize they already have a financial problem in terms of being able to support their citizens, and so if you were to extend life, that would have a dramatic effect on the number of citizens they have and increase them without the mitigating factor of having the money to take care of those citizens once they're increased. And so there would have to be some care in terms of making sure the financial aspects of that were addressed. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot more people that aren't working, and the economy could collapse on its own weight. And so, in some of the emerging nations, that they would need to solve some of the food, clean water, and medicine issues first before they pass that through. Though, as has been pointed out, largely it will be the wealthiest citizens of the world that will probably get these treatments first, and as opposed to the folks on the other end of the spectrum. But that's going to create a whole different kind of inequity and certainly social problems that we're not prepared to deal with. But where the benefit does exist is with regard to medical tourism and developing clinics that can reliably. There are a lot of scams out there. There are a substantial number of scams out there, but that can reliably extend life. A practical application of the technology, perhaps short term. And Don was talking about that, or excuse me, Dan was talking about that. Is digital immortality, the capturing of the digital information that defines the person, and putting that into some type of a computer network so those resources can be extended beyond the individual's life. Every country has people that stand above their peers in terms of knowledge and capability. And when those people die, then the nation loses that resource. And so near-term efforts to keep that from happening, to keep the people, the knowledge of individuals from going when the individuals pass, so you retain that intellectual property in the country, could be incredibly important. In fact, if you captured that during the education process for the individual, even though that individual was still living and left the state, you'd still benefit from the knowledge that was acquired and the analytical capability that you've emulated. So human digital twins become a very viable path, at least from the state's view, how to apply an immortality type construct without having the economic disadvantage of having to support the human being that continues. And we can emulate people reasonably well now. We can't transfer your consciousness into a machine, but we do have the capability to create emulations in conversational computers that can present as if they were the individual and fool others. I know I've mentioned this before, but in a large insurance trial that occurred here, we had artificial intelligences that people were asking out on dates because they thought they were real people. So if you can capture that knowledge, those logic structures that exist in those leading educators, in the leading scientists, and even in the leading politicians that understand how to get things done in the existing political infrastructure, that stuff could be captured and be used to train others, be used as advisory reference. And once again, you wouldn't lose that capability if the individual died or left the country. Probably the most beneficial way to work right now, on top of the clinics and medical tourism, for an emerging country. At least that's my view.
Thank you, Professor Rob. Mr. Adam.
Sharif. How's my volume? Is that okay?
Yes, it's okay.
I'll
Okay, please
probably
proceed.
get a new microphone next time. Thank you.
Yeah, stand close because you're still pretty light.
Yeah, I'll definitely get a new microphone. Thanks, Fi. So, as a futurist, life extension is a topic that has been on my mind for many, many years. Actually, I think it was life extension, cryonics, Ray Kurzweil, like Mr. Dan mentioned, as well as Kurzweil's compulsive goalpost moving. The singularity, all that formed an entry point for me when I first started taking a serious interest in transhumanism about 16 or 17 years ago. So life extension is a topic that has been quite close to my heart for a fairly long time, because as I have grown up and gotten a little bit older, death feels like something that is getting incrementally closer and closer, very slowly but fast enough, and bit by bit, and that's still way too fast. And as my own parents and older brother are getting older with me, with all of us, it has become more of a source of anxiety for me now. Certainly now more than it was before, certainly, and obviously even. I remember watching a few interviews with Ray Kurzweil detailing his quest to resurrect his father, who died obviously, who Kurzweil was very close to by the sounds of it, and he is hoping to achieve that using all the personal items, belongings, photographs of him, the sound of his voice and recordings, his diary entries, all the music he composed that he left behind, along with all the other trinkets, objects, achievements, personal items. That Ray Kurzweil was hoping to use as resources that a supercomputer could scan and then use to bring his father back. So, philosophically, would he still be considered to be Ray's father, or just a clever, or perhaps not so clever copy mimicking him, who might not even have consciousness? Nevertheless, no matter how far and remote such a possibility or impossibility, if that unfortunately becomes the case, no matter how far futuristic and strange that idea seems from this particular vantage point, I do empathize with Ray Kurzweil's dream, certainly from a more emotional and even spiritual perspective. After watching not just me getting older, but also after watching my parents and the rest of my family grow older, I have developed a little bit more of a heightened awareness and sensitivity to the problem of death, as well as the desirability of radically extended human lifespans, indefinite biological lifespans, not just for oneself, but for our friends, families, loved ones, treasured acquaintances. Um, and I'm sure we are all I'm sorry, excuse me, a balance between living longer and still enjoying life enough to want to extend one's own lifespan. I'm sure we're all familiar with the saying, "It's not death itself I fear; it's how I am going to die." And that saying definitely speaks for me. Actually, for me, it has become a double concern, a twinned, double pronged problem, if you will. I am anxious about death, but I am also anxious about the prospect of meeting death by way of an awful, prolonged suffering. So, in my opinion, we need to treat this as a double concern, I think. I think it would be wise to try and develop solutions to both suffering in order to abolish it or minimize it radically, alongside finding answers to mortality. Um, for me, it's not one kind of anxiety for both. I am anxious at the prospect of death from a philosophical and existential standpoint, and I'm anxious about suffering from a more ethical and moral standpoint. They're intertwined. We certainly don't want extended lifespans before we find permanent solutions to the world's most urgent and pressing problems. We want to live long on a planet where it's worth our while to do so, a place that is more accommodating than it is now, because with this level of despair in the world as it is now, where lifespans of 80, 70, 60 years long are still too long for people living or existing, surviving under great amounts of suffering, um, is still too long for them. So, like I said in yesterday's episode, topics within transhumanism are met with the most cliched rebuttals, like Brave New World being brought up in about the hedonistic imperative. That is brought up a lot, Brave New World. And one of the most common yet puzzling rebuttals arguing against life extension is, wouldn't you get bored? So, well, I think that says a lot more about the person asking the question rather than the life extensionist being questioned. If someone asks you that, remind them just how big the Earth's oceans are and how much is still waiting to be explored down there, how many possible solar systems out there, how big the universe is, how much knowledge there is still to learn out there. So, yeah, so this topic is very close to my heart. So I was very pleased that you chose this one, Sharif. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Ila, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Yes. As you are also a researcher of this life extensions, and this is very much popular in developed nations. But my question is that right now, healthcare is a big issue around the world. The government and corporation, they want to invest more money on healthcare system. But my question is that this kind of life extension and visionary project, it will be helpful for Asian community or the developing nations, or what is your observation, or what is your advice for them?
Well, my advice is to advocate for greater public investment in this field, in the aging field, in the longevity field, so you don't leave it all to Western billionaires to patent and sell. So that's my advice. Really, you have to lobby your government to raise the movement in your country, because it's eventually it's about people's entitlement to those therapies. If public funds will be invested, then people who pay the taxes will be entitled to it. Otherwise, it will be a private business. And also education. Also, a very important part of it is education. Actually, why is it important for Asian nations, for the developing nations? Because longevity comes in synergy with other human values like education, economic development. You know, the Gini index, the index of human development, it is composed of longevity, education, and prosperity, economic prosperity. So if you advance longevity, actually advance all those markers, all those values. So longevity is a very good proxy to develop a nation.
Thank you. Dr. Talib, can you hear me? Dr. Talib, can you hear me? I'm sorry, I think he has internet problem. Professor David Smith. Yes.
The topics we've talked about today have been fantastic, and let me pull back to the business side of this for a moment and get out of the science part, out of the academic part, and just really talk about what's happening in the business world on this. One of the real interesting things to me is there are now multiple VC funds which are dedicated to life extension and to really seeing what's there. One of the VC funds has a couple of $100 million in it. That fund is raising another one right now where their projected goal is a little bit over $300 million to apply towards the commercialization of radical life extension. So we're beginning to see significant money pour into not just is it possible, but how do I commercialize it? How do I begin to put those pieces together, and how we're going to do that? This VC fund is kind of interesting because they've taken their funding and they've put it in three buckets. One of them they call Horizon One, and it's what can we do today to stay on the path, and how do we stay in good health? And like I talked about before, that one's looking at things like wearables, do-it-yourself diagnostics, digital healthcare delivery, and a lot of apps to go in there and be able to support what you're doing. And to some people, that's boring compared to how do I do regenerative health? How can I do things to grow a new retina in my eye? Or even what the third phase of theirs is how do I generate whole new organs? How can I grow a new lung? a new heart, other things like that. But as you look at those, the Horizon 1 we can do today. The Horizon 2 is new technologies, but it's here. It's that Horizon 2 will not only slow down aging, but reverse it. And it's things like gene therapy, some age reversal drugs and things. A lot of the promise of regenerative medicines in Horizon 2. And the final one on there is organ replacement. I love one of the terms they have in their stuff. And, we've talked a lot about things like the Internet of Things in regenerative healthcare. And part of actually a couple of the topics being presented tomorrow at RadFest is the Internet of the Body. So they're taking, again, the concepts we have and applying this connected ecosystem, this cooperative ecosystem of regenerative healthcare and putting it into an Internet of the Body, which I think is really interesting. But that leads us to where we see things going. Today, in the United States, the average life expectancy is about 78 years old. But to a lot of the people who are in healthcare, a lot of the scientists in academia, many are believing that expected life expectancy is about 20 years too early. And they're thinking we're seeing more and more going to in our late 90s, early 100s. And just if you look at some of the episodical outside of fatal disease, outside of episodical things, we're seeing that trend going there too. So to me, it's interesting that when I was younger, life expectancy extension was really in the domain of science. Where we are today, it's that science being commercialized. And to me, that's very exciting, Sharif, as we go forward, because that brings up opportunities for all of the different stakeholders to come together and work on this to make it a success. And the downside of it, again, I have to say this, is that it has to be something that we look at globally and not just in one country or another like that. What affects us globally will affect our life extension capabilities as well.
Mhm. Thank you, Mr. Dan.
I was thinking about how I uh, got interested in the life extension movement, and I think I've really have to tip my hat to Dr. Timothy Leary, who had after he got out of prison in 1976, he started a philosophy called SMILE, which was an acronym, SMI squared LE. And they really all go together. SM was space migration, I squared intelligence increase, LE life extension. Because after all, I mean, if you extend your life indefinitely, but we're on this dying planet, I mean, that seems like a kind of, a fail, because the point of extending your life is to have more opportunities to create and explore and fulfill all the best parts of being a human being. And so I think that Tim Leary really doesn't get enough credit for the whole SMILE movement. Another thing to look at is not only quality of life, but quality of death. You want to maximize the good part of your life and minimize the painful and tragic and suffering part of your life, which would be death. And you also want to be able to voluntarily choose either one. I mean, there've been fiction novels written about not being able to be immortal, but not to have a choice in the matter. Wouldn't it potentially drive a consciousness over the edge in some point? And then I talked earlier about religions that they use as a selling point. You're going to live forever in heaven if you're good, and if you're bad, you're going to be non-existent forever, or worse yet, you're going to be suffering forever. The heaven and hell idea. Other religions have the idea of reincarnation, that they use the fact that we'll come back in another form based on the karma that we've achieved in this life, or the choices we've made. I think even the Jewish religion, they believe you get a better place in heaven based on your good works. And even Voltaire acknowledged this idea that when he said if God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him, because he saw God as this entity that was enforcing morality. That if you didn't have these ideas of an afterlife and with punishment or a reward, people would just be very bad moral actors. But anyway, back to the idea about cryonics, which I spoke of earlier. We really do that already in medicine. We do something called putting people into medical comas. If we can't treat something properly with the existing circumstances, the medicine will often induce a coma until the patient can recover, or the facilities around them can be rallied to treat their condition more effectively. And some cryonicists have pointed out that, well, this is really no different than cryonics. We're just putting the person in a very cold medical coma until we can treat them better in the future. So I wanted to bring that point up. And earlier I was speaking about DNA, the immortal molecule, and really we are not one entity. We're a collection of trillions of cells. Most of them are non-based DNA cells. I think non-DNA cells outnumber the DNA cells in your body by something like 24 to 1. But these cells routinely go away at different rates. I think that the fastest wearing out cell is the red blood cell. Every few days they die off and they're excreted and they have to be regenerated. Your stomach lining, your mucous membranes, they change every in a matter of days or weeks. Anyway, you can research the different parts of your body. So really, it's like the saying, you can't step in the same river twice, because the river, it looks like the same river, but the water flowing through it is always different. Or if you make a knot and you slide the knot along the rope, it looks like the same knot, but it's made of different pieces of rope. So during a course of a life, we represent this huge accumulation of molecules that are coming and going. So I think we need to think of our lives as not wholly our own. We're part of this biosphere, that like you could think of the when you see a bee on a flower, I observe, well, the bee is the part of the flower that can fly around. So all life in the biosphere is really one life, and this would be the Gaia hypothesis, that the Earth and all of its living things constitute a vast, unified living organism. So I'd like to see more of this discussion brought into the idea of indefinite longevity, quality of life, quality of death, choice on either matter. And I think you need to get a proper perspective by looking at whole systems. And these questions of indefinite longevity are part of whole systems. I'm complete. Thanks.
The host left us.
Yeah, so Sharif decided to
He's been doing that lately.
Yeah, the nature of telecommunications apparently is still not stable. We probably.
By the way, RADFest. I couldn't find the acronym, but someone, Ilya, said it's RAD stands for Revolution Against Aging and Death. So RAAD Fest. So.
And if you haven't attended it, you should. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is what, the fourth one? I think it started in 2018.
I think it's actually
maybe the fifth one.
I think it's the fifth one.
Certainly a revolution we can all get behind.
Yeah. I hold that a little revolution now and then is a good thing.
So we probably should move to our closing comments. We're getting up towards the top of the hour. So at least with regard to emerging, I'll go first, and then we'll follow with Adam, and then Ilya, then David, and then Dan again. So that hopefully Sharif will wander back sometime during this period. So final comments. The life longevity is a relatively lucrative and long-standing field. It has all kinds of different elements, from biological to technological. The concept of the singularity certainly falls within the concept of life extension, and digital immortality is probably the only sure way we could life extend indefinitely, because once you digitize a person, that person, like everything else on the internet, will probably last forever. We are still fairly far away from, because we're not even sure if a soul exists, to being able to transfer you into a machine and have that machine be you. There are existential aspects of this that we all still need to address, but we can certainly create digital twins now, and perhaps in the near term, at least with regard to digital technology, that's something we should do, at least with those people that are critical to decision making, that have a unique skill set, or have a unique educational background. Having a top instructor, for instance, being able to teach well after their life has passed could be particularly useful. Certain concepts, being able to speak to the authors of texts that have long passed, would be an unusual and extreme educational advantage for the students that could do so. And if you could build a repository of those experts digitized, it would be a huge benefit to education and into sustaining the knowledge that people have, as opposed to losing it at death. Sharif, welcome back. I suggest we move to closing comments, because you dropped
Exactly.
off.
Exactly. Thank you.
You're welcome. So the cryonics, this idea of being frozen and emerging, is a little bit different than being put into a coma. The difficulty has been, how do you keep the cells themselves from destructing? Once you freeze a body and then you unfreeze it, they tend to turn into a little bit of soup, and the brain in particular doesn't hold up well. On the other hand, we've had plenty of instances where people have been frozen for extended periods of time accidentally, and thawed out and lived a long and healthful life. So certainly cryonics shows benefit. There undoubtedly is a way to do it, but doing it without experiencing massive cellular loss is something we have not successfully been able to do repetitively in the lab. There have been examples of pets that have been frozen and thawed and they functioned after that. But those experiments have been very difficult to repeat, if not impossible. And so cryonics is still kind of in the science fiction stage now, as opposed to practical application outside of being able to refrigerate and extend certain body parts, which we are able to do to a certain extent when we're doing transplants, but not indefinitely. And of course, the concept of being, if you have a sickness they don't have a cure for, being able to be frozen and then thawed once a cure exists would be a huge benefit if we could get it to work. And sadly, we can't yet. So the science continues to advance. It is, as I mentioned before, some of the lucrative areas are medical tourism, and also if you were able to develop the repositories, the digital repositories for the intelligence that I mentioned earlier, that's something you could sell and market out to other countries as a resource, and could relatively quickly become self-funding. So there are economic advantages to this beyond just the elimination of sickness and extending life. Be aware that the things we know of that will extend life is exercise, managing your diet, and making sure that you understand the carcinogens and other elements that can enter a diet that can cause you to die prematurely and die poorly. I think, as Adam pointed out, for a lot of us that are getting older, it's not so much death that's concerning. It's the possibility of an extended death, an extended painful death, that is concerning. And so if you can mitigate that, you can eliminate an awful lot of human suffering for those people that have lived a long life and really probably deserve a respectful death. So a lot of potential here. I expect within the next 30 years, the advancements are going to be extreme. We're expected to get to the point of being able to fully emulate the human brain. Within the next 30 years, we should have either cryonics figured out or an alternative to it figured out in the next 30 years. And as many have pointed out, the children of today, the young children today, will probably have life expectancies that exceed our wildest capabilities today. So good luck for the kids. And that's it for me today. Adam?
Thank you, Professor Rob. Mr. Adam, what's your concluding remarks?
Thank you very much. I really liked what Mr. Dan was saying about horrific circumstances where being immortal would be most undesirable. It reminded me of the sci-fi book I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison. It's a subgenre I like to call immortality horror, which encompasses that I have no mouth and I must scream. The ending of the film, The Black Hole, where Dr. Hans Reinhardt fuses and is encased inside the Maximilian robot in a hell dimension, The Jaunt by Stephen King and the Fielders. But one aspect that I find quite compelling is, and I touched upon this a few minutes ago, is this tug of war between extending lifespans, usually by healthier and healthier lifestyles and other things like cryogenics, against the enjoyment of pleasures, novel experiences, maybe the odd vice here and there that, whilst they might not be particularly healthy, still have a life affirming effect on a person, where these kinds of experiences could inspire someone to look forward to doing that again and then be motivated to then want to extend their lifespan to enjoy more life experiences. I remember reading a blog post, I think it was about influential life extensionists at some conference being sparking up a cigarette, and Aubrey de Grey received similar puzzlement with his beer diet, which is more of a swing to the extreme rather than finding a balance between the two. Um, I, I think it's a neat, novel testament to the complexities of the human personality, and we really are walking contradictions. But moderation and balance are particularly exciting lifestyles. But extreme conditions are where we can feel most alive, and are ideal conditions for novel and interesting and exciting developments. And it's a fertile climate for creativity. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. Professor Dr. Ila, what's your concluding remarks?
My concluding remark is that I'm just happy that such discussions are taking place, that they're brought to the attention of the audience in Asia, in the developing countries generally, because obviously this topic is very much not in the focus of public attention there. It needs to be brought more to the focus. It affects the entire world, all of us, all of our education. So I hope more of such discussions take place, and that's how we will build the global movement for health and longevity for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Professor David Smith, what's your concluding remarks?
I hope that we do more topics like this in the future as well. I believe these are some of them that will get communities engaged in thinking not what's just next, but what is possible. And as we look at it, particularly how it impacts those of us who are on the panel today, in this area of healthcare, it takes about 17 years for research to reach clinical practice. So my hope is that we can do some radical disruption in this area to move these science breakthroughs into clinical practice and out to the consumers faster, and hope that we can begin to get that. We've seen with COVID that there are ways to dramatically speed up the processes to move science out of the labs, through the processes, and into the commercial marketplace. I believe that is necessary to do here. I also believe that even though the cost of things in this area for the most radical ones is high, but for the ones that get us to near term capabilities, the Horizon one that the VCs talked about, I think those are open to the average entrepreneur today. Things like how to better do devices, how to take apps that help us walk through and do things to reach life expectancy, longer life expectancy, how to change our diet, how to reverse the trend that as you get older, you slow down. And that's one of the trends that I think is going to affect life expectancy. The other thing I think is expecting life expectancy today is we, again, as we've talked in the past, need to look at our approach to education, our approach to life and leisure. Back in the days where you went to school, you went to work, and you retired, the science back then is you typically retired less than 10 years before you died. Today, we're seeing that dramatically stretched out. You know, the news, uh, earlier this week is a gentleman who was 119 and 162 days just passed away. And they believe he was the oldest person. And one of his comments was interesting. He says, "Well, I'm studying for another job," is what he told somebody a couple of years ago. I think that type of mindset is important as we look at life extension. But how does that change our view of education? Education has to become lifelong, not just let me get through college degrees and see what to do next. Um, One of my mentors, Dr. George Kosnetsky, used to say at his time that an average student would go through 5 to 7 career changes in their lifetimes. I think we now have to take that number and flip it up to probably 20 job career changes if we're going to live this long to 125 and above. So the whole concept of, you know, in the United States, we have Social Security. Life extension is going to make Social Security go bankrupt much earlier. Um, and you see those things. Cost will fall. I remember when the first cell phone came out, the cost to acquire that was very expensive. I can get a basic cell phone today for about $10, and that's going to really help us. Uh, we have to look at something. There's a limit called the Hayflick limit, which says that at some point cells uh, quit reproducing themselves, quit replicating, and I love their term on this. They become zombie cells. We need still some science like that to understand the nuances of things like the Hayflick limit and others. So there still is a lot of science left to be done on this as well. But I'm a personal believer with the advances I've seen from the time I was on one of the committees at NIH and others, that regenerative healthcare will be full blown working within the next 10 years, like Rob mentioned. And I think we'll see advances in machine learning, image recognition, and application through uh, AI technology speed that up even more. So I think the future's bright. I want to be a beneficiary of radical life extension, and I hope it happens sooner than later. So, Sharif, thank you.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Mr. Dan, what's your concluding remarks?
Well, when we look at a topic like life extension, even radical life extension, which I don't know, you need to look at, of course, that as a summation of factors. We have a country in the world, Bhutan, that has a gross national happiness index. They don't pass a law or take any governmental action unless it adds to the overall happiness. And I think people should take this kind of example with their own lives. Joseph Campbell, who was an amazing athlete and author, he said follow your bliss. And if you look at the oldest people, that's generally what they've done. They've lived lives that where they followed their bliss. They didn't get cubbyholed into little repetitive, robotic jobs and activities, and they usually gathered around them their Dunbar tribe, as I like to say, the 150 or so people that you can cognitively really become close to during a life or in the course of a day in a life. Now, another thing we haven't talked about as a way to do life extension, it sounds a little unusual, but lucid dreaming. There are actually ways where you can become willful and self-aware that you are in a dream, and you can conjure like anything you want. It's like being in a magical universe, and there's actually technologies that have been developed to do this practice. It's very fascinating. There's something called the dream light that monitors your brain waves, and when it senses that you're in REM sleep or the deep dream brainwave state, it will start flashing a light. And if you remember to look for that flashing light in your dream, then you can say, aha, I'm dreaming. I could do whatever I want. Even people that are in prison, they can say, well, I'm only in prison half the time, and when I'm dreaming, I'm not in prison. So there's a cheap, effective way to double your lifespan is use your nighttime state as a way to have more virtual life, shall we say. So we need to look at the question of indefinite longevity in a holistic way. Some people have stated, well, this is not going to be fair because people who have lived longer are going to have bigger Rolodexes, and young people will never be able to compete with their network of contacts and their experience. So, that's a danger of more social inequality there. But it's a great topic. It should be talked about more, and I would love to start a poll for which country is going to be the one that paves that way with the treating aging as a disease policy. So, in fact, I think every factor in the transhumanist canon, the singularity canon, we should have a poll of when's it going to happen, kind of like a sports betting thing. I think it'd be useful and fun. So looking forward to living as long as I can. I'm thinking at least 250 would be my my goal, because there's a lot of stuff I want to do. So I'll see you all in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. This is excellent sessions. I'm sure our audience also really like today's sessions. And the World Talent Economy Forum, we are actually supporting a lot of grassroots level people. But good point is that not only example Malaysia or Singapore, even country like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, many countries, largest corporations, governments, as well as different political organizations and different ministries, they start to believe that World Talent Economy Forum perhaps the future of the university. And regularly they are learning from our show, and they are also promoting our show to their community. So that is the way we are growing. And I'm very much happy every day, at least different largest group of companies and the education institutions, and they are joining World Talent Economy Forum. They are collaborating with World Talent Economy Forum. We need all of your support, and all credits goes to our speakers, our mentors, our board of advisors, our fellow, those who always support World Talent Economy Forums. Perhaps next 1 year will be very interesting. Like I told you, ICC, International Chamber of Commerce, Malaysia Climate Change Divisions, Bangladesh government, Indian governments, Pakistan governments, Philippines, Vietnam, many government body and corporation, they are joining. So even we need new blood, like we need more fellow like Mr. Adam, because things are growing very fast. We have our like board of advisor, they will guide us, and we have our fellow, because we have to organize our lot of work, because we are developing startup ecosystem in the village area, especially different government, they really like this system. And definitely life extensions, healthcare system, water purifications, everything we need, and we need a better collaboration, better relationship in between developed nations and developing nation, and this is the way to minimize the gap. And I'm really grateful to all of our speakers, how they are contributing for World Talent Economy Forum, and different ministry especially, they give special thanks to all of our speakers, because how they observing and how actually our speakers contributing through this channel, YouTube channel and social media, it's really helpful for ecosystem development. Yes, we need more researcher, we need more organization, and we are advocate for modern science, engineering, and technology. Thank you for all of your support. Thank you, Professor Rob, Mr. Adam, Professor Ila, Professor David Smith, and Mr. Dan, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. Bye bye and take care.